Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Some very interesting news coming out of the IBF that I did want to touch on, with the sanctioning body ordering a purse bid for a final eliminator fight between Bulgarian Kubrat Pulev and American Dominic Breazeale. So if this fight is made, and that's a big if, and more of my thoughts on that soon, the winner would then become the mandatory to the IBF strap, which, as we know at the time of this video being published, is held by the Briton Anthony Joshua. Okay, initial thoughts. This is a competitive heavyweight fight. These two guys are legitimate top 10 contenders. It is the sort of matchup we don't see nearly often enough. And when I think about it too, if I'm just tossing around prospective matchups between guys in the top 20 or so, pairing guys for match-offs, a Breazeale versus Pulev fight isn't one that generally comes to mind. But actually, when I think about it, I go, oh, yeah, I think I quite like this fight. So in Pulev, we have a guy who's been a firm fixture in the top 10 contenders for a number of years, generally regarded as someone at or just outside the top 5. He sports a 25-1 record, with the solitary loss coming to Vladimir Klitschko back in 2014. And at that time, he went in all gung-ho against Vlad, and he ultimately got demolished. It was completely the wrong strategy, and arguably it was Klitschko's last dominant performance. But Pulev, he's well-schooled, he's got a great jab, and really that's probably his greatest asset. He delivers it with some zip. It's a real weapon. One of the knocks on Pulev, though, is generally he's not regarded as a massive puncher. He's not sleeping guys. He's not knocking a lot of guys out. So how that would bode for the relatively durable Breazeale, it's debatable, but that's what makes this fight interesting, I believe. One of the things that's a bit of an open question for me is, how much does Kubrat Pulev have left in the tank? He's 36. Is he still in the tail end of his prime? Or has he lost a step? It's hard to know given the opponents he's faced recently. He's only had the 5 fights since the 2014 loss to Vlad. And the only name of note is Derek Chisora, and that was back in 2016. In his most recent performance, and this was in April 2017, he scored a unanimous 12-round decision over a faded Kevin Johnson. Couldn't get him out of there. As we know, he was set to face Anthony Joshua in October 2017 as the IBF mandatory challenger, but he was forced to pull out through injury just 12 days before the fight, and that's when Carlos Takam was drafted in. And since then, Pulev, he's just kind of fallen off the map. He's become a bit of a forgotten man in the division. I was really wondering, what is this kind of guy going to do? Is he going to stay the course? But for me, there's some question marks about Pulev, his activity. How much does he have left? But I'm very happy for him to show me in a Breazeale fight. And Breazeale, very interesting style matchup for Pulev because he's a very big guy. What is he, 6'7", and he keeps coming. Even if you put him down hard like Isu Ogono did in February 2017, he gets up. He keeps getting up. He shows heart, he comes back, and he keeps swinging. He's managed to will himself to wins over the likes of Ogono and Amir Mansour. And Amir Mansour was really piecing up Dominic Breazeale. But he's come back, he's been tough, he's been durable, and he's withstood a huge amount of punishment and come through with a W. I think it can be argued the more polished Pulev, he'll probably be able to almost hit Breazeale at will, like other fighters have been able to do. But Breazeale, he can crack. And when he does have the ability to drop and stop opponents. So it could well be one of those sort of fights where Pulev might be racing away with it, but then find himself in trouble after eating a monster right hand or something similar. But at first glance, I would definitely favour Kubrat Pulev if this fight is made. But I would not be writing off Dominic Breazeale's chances. But I do wonder, will this fight be made? They've been given until April 10th to work out a deal. But the IBF is not the only potential avenue that Breazeale can pursue. He can actually go for a fight with WBC champion Deontay Wilder. That is potentially on the horizon. Right now, he's the number 2 in the WBC. And not only that, Both Wilder and Breazeale are Al Haymon fighters, so it should be an easy fight to make. It's an in-house fight. Keep the money in-house. Right now, though, the thing that's in the way, the domino that needs to fall before we can, some of this mist clears and we know where different fighters will go, it's the Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker fight. Say, should Parker win, it will force a rematch with Joshua, and that frees up Wilder to seek out other opponents. But conversely, should Joshua win, there's no guarantees that a Joshua-Wilder unification is next. It could happen. That's the fight we do want to see. But it does seem from what we're hearing, if Joshua wins next, that potentially won't be the next fight for Anthony Joshua. And I actually think it's more likely that Joshua faces Alexander Povetkin next, who's #1 in the WBA and WBO. I could see that fight being ordered immediately after a Joshua win. I mean, as it is, I'm half expecting Alexander Povetkin to jump in the ring with Joshua if Joshua and Povetkin win. Because remember, Povetkin is fighting David Price on the undercard. And Eddie Hearn, Joshua's promoter, he's looking at that Povetkin fight, looking to warm fans, particularly British fans, up to the prospect of a Povetkin fight. So if that does happen, well then that frees the way for a Wilder-Breazeale fight, which would be a voluntary defence. And I wouldn't mind that fight, but I do know who I would favour. The Alabama right hand, of course. And I know there's going to be a number of comments, a number of people who will say, well, hang on. Wilder should be facing Dillian Whyte next if a unification is not happening. But for me, I just think the reality is, if it's a voluntary defence, a Breazeale fight, it's just more likely. That's just my personal opinion. And it appears Wilder does want Whyte to wait his turn, to wait for as long as possible. And let's face it, the WBC may not order a mandatory challenger for Wilder for a number of months yet. I actually did see Eddie Hearn say to IFL TV that an offer, or the offer to Deontay Wilder for a Dillian Whyte fight has been increased again. But even then, I'm not sure that's going to get it made. But getting back to the topic, if an opportunity presents itself in that first week of April for Breazeale to fight Wilder, I do think he will take it and forego the opportunity to fight Kubrat Pulev. In that case, then maybe the IBF looks at others in that top 6 or the wider 15, like, for example, #3 ranked Jarrell Miller. But of course, he would have to get past Johan Duhaupas on April 28th. And that's not a given, but I think Miller is definitely highly favoured to win in that one. And just on the IBF, on the face of it, I was a little surprised that they opted for a #2 versus #6 final eliminator. But perhaps that could mean that Jarrell Miller at 3, Dillian Whyte at 4, and Alexander Povetkin at 5. That perhaps they all passed on the opportunity, and it fell to Breazeale at 6. And potentially he said, for the moment, okay, I'll take this opportunity. It also begs the question as well, say Breazeale and Pulev happens, and then Breazeale wins. Do we want to potentially see him fighting Anthony Joshua again, or whoever has the belt? Do we want to see him fighting for the IBF strap again, just a couple of years after he was so thoroughly beaten by Anthony Joshua? I'm not sure I really want to see Anthony Joshua versus Breazeale too. What do you make of that? Food for thought. If it does go ahead, I do like a Breazeale-Pulev fight. But because of some of the moving parts in the heavyweight division, I'm not so sure it will happen. Time will tell. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.